The white room was cold and empty. Only 2 chairs sat in the middle, facing each other across a metal table. The walls had no windows and the bright lights made everything look harsh and clean. This was where they brought aliens to ask questions. This was where secrets came out. Crixtal sat in the smaller chair. His reptilian body was covered in dark green scales that should have been shiny, but now they looked dull and broken. His left arm was gone, cut off at the shoulder. The wound had healed, but ugly scars marked where it used to be. His yellow eyes moved around the room like he was looking for danger that might come from anywhere. The door opened with a soft hiss. A human walked in wearing a dark blue uniform. He was tall and thin with black hair and serious eyes. His name tag said Lee Daeho in both human letters and galactic script. He carried a data pad and moved with the careful steps of someone who had been in many fights. "I am Commander Lee Daeho of the Galactic Coalition Intelligence Division," the human said. His voice was calm and steady. "You are Crixtal of the Velthari 3rd Battle Group, is this correct?" Crixtal's tongue flicked out to taste the air. It was something his kind did when they were nervous. "Yes," he said. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "That is what I was." Lee Daeho sat down in the other chair. He placed his data pad on the table but did not turn it on yet. "You were found floating in an escape pod 3 days ago. Your ship was destroyed. Your entire battle group was destroyed. You were the only survivor out of 12,000 Velthari soldiers." The alien's claws scratched against the metal table. "We were told it would be easy," Crixtal said. "We were told the humans were weak, primitive, that they had no real weapons." "Tell me what happened," Lee Daeho said. "Start from the beginning." Crixtal was quiet for a long time. His good hand touched the place where his left arm used to be. "The High Command called us to the briefing room 6 weeks ago. General Tekmar stood before the hologram of a small planet. Blue and green with white clouds. It looked peaceful. Kepler 442b, Lee Daeho said. The planet where the human colony of New Busan was built. Yes. The general told us about the humans who lived there. He said they were refugees from their homeworld. Maybe 10,000 of them. Farmers and miners and builders. They had been there for only 5 years. The general laughed when he showed us pictures of their settlement. Crixtal's eyes grew distant as he remembered. The buildings were made of simple metal. No energy shields. No plasma barriers. Just metal walls and glass windows. Their vehicles used wheels and burned fossil fuel. Primitive. The general said it would take us 1 day to make them surrender. Maybe less, but how many ships did you bring? Lee Daeho asked. 12 battleships, 40 attack cruisers, 200 fighter craft, and the ground forces. 5,000 elite Velthari warriors with full combat suits and energy weapons, plus the heavy equipment, hover tanks, plasma artillery, orbital bombardment platforms. The human made notes on his data pad. That is a lot of firepower for 10,000 farmers. The High Command wanted to make an example, Crixtal said. Other human colonies were spreading through this part of the galaxy. The Empire thought that if we destroyed one colony completely, the others would surrender without fighting. But that is not what happened. Crixtal's claws dug deeper into the table. No, that is not what happened. Lee Daeho leaned forward slightly. What was your job in the battle group? I was a senior combat controller. I managed the communication systems between our ground forces and the ships in orbit. I coordinated the attacks. I watched everything through the sensor networks. So you saw it all? I saw it all, Crixtal repeated. His voice became quieter. At first, everything went as planned. Our ships came out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. The human settlement had no orbital defenses. No warning satellites. No fighter squadrons. They should have known we were coming, but they sent no messages asking for help. What did you think about that? We thought they were too scared to fight, or maybe too stupid to understand what was happening. The general ordered all ships to attack position. We began scanning the planet for military targets. Crixtal paused and touched his throat. That was when we found the first strange thing. Our scanners showed the human settlement, but they also showed energy readings we did not understand. Not weapons, not shields, just energy moving in patterns under the ground. Did you investigate these energy readings? The general said they were probably mining equipment. Humans were known to dig deep holes in planets to find metals and crystals. He said it was not important. He ordered the bombardment to begin. Lee Daeho's expression did not change, but his fingers stopped moving across the data pad. You bombed the settlement from orbit? Yes, standard procedure for primitive targets. 6 battleships fired plasma bombs at the human buildings. We watched on the screens as the settlement burned. The metal buildings melted. The vehicles exploded. Everything was destroyed in 15 minutes, and then we waited for survivors to come out and surrender. That is what always happened with primitive species. They would hide while we destroyed their cities, then come out waving white flags or sending surrender messages. Crystal's voice became very quiet, but no one came out. No surrender messages, no white flags, nothing. What did you do next? The general sent down scout teams to check for survivors. 50 Velthari soldiers in combat armor. They had energy rifles and scanner equipment. Their job was to find any humans who were still alive and bring them back to the ships for questioning. What did the scouts find? Nothing. Empty ruins, melted metal, burned ground, no bodies, no blood, no signs that anyone had ever lived there. It was like the humans had never existed. Lee Dae-ho made more notes. What did your general think about this? He was angry. He thought the humans had escaped before we arrived. Maybe they had ships we did not see. Maybe they had hidden bases somewhere else on the planet. He ordered a full planetary scan. And what did that scan show? Krikstal's good hand began to shake. That was when we found them. The energy readings under the ground were stronger now. Much stronger. And they were moving. Moving in patterns that looked like a military formation. The humans were underground? Yes, but not just hiding. They had built something down there. Something big. Our deep scanners could not see exactly what it was, but the energy patterns showed tunnels. Lots of tunnels. Going everywhere under the planet's surface. What did your general do then? He ordered ground penetration bombs. Special weapons designed to break through rock and soil. We dropped them all over the area where the human settlement used to be. The bombs were supposed to collapse any underground spaces. Krikstal stopped talking. His breathing became faster. But the bombs did not work the way they were supposed to. What do you mean? Some of them exploded underground like they should. But others... Krikstal's voice trailed off. Others were caught. Somehow the humans caught our bombs before they could explode. And then they sent them back. Lee Dae-ho's eyes narrowed. The humans sent your own bombs back at you? Yes, but not the same way we sent them. They changed them. Made them different. When our bombs came back up from the ground, they moved in ways that our ships could not predict. They followed our fighters and exploded next to them. They found our battleships and attached to the hulls before exploding. How many ships did you lose? 8 fighters in the first wave. Then 3 attack cruisers, then... Krikstal stopped and put his head down. Then the humans started talking to us. Talking to you? Yes, on our own communication channels. Channels that were supposed to be secret. Military frequencies that only Velthari equipment could use. But somehow they were there. In our networks. Listening to everything. Lee Dae-ho was very still. What did they say? A human voice came through the speakers on every ship in our battle group. A female voice. She spoke perfect Velthari language. Perfect grammar. Perfect accent. She said... Krikstal looked up at the human across from him. She said, "Welcome to New Busan, we have been waiting for you." The room was very quiet. Lee Dae-ho put down his datapad and looked directly at Krikstal. "They were waiting for you." Yes, and then she said something that made everyone on our ships very afraid. She said, "We know about the Velthari Empire. We know about your ships. We know about your weapons. We know about your tactics. And we know how to beat you." What happened next? Krikstal's remaining hand formed a fist. The general ordered an immediate full assault. All ground forces, all fighters, all ships. He said the humans were bluffing. He said no primitive species could really fight the Velthari Empire. But he was wrong. He was very wrong, Krikstal said. What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about humans. And it taught me why my people should be very, very afraid. Lee Dae-ho activated his datapad and began recording. "Tell me about the ground assault," he said. Krikstal closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they looked tired and old. The general chose his best soldiers for the first wave. 200 Velthari warriors in full combat armor. Each one had energy shields, plasma rifles, and personal force fields. They rode in 20 hover tanks with heavy weapons. You said these were elite soldiers? The best in the Empire. Each warrior had fought in at least 10 battles against other alien species. The hover tanks had armor that could stop any known weapon. Their plasma cannons could destroy buildings with one shot. Krixtel rubbed his forehead with his good hand. We also sent down medical teams, communication specialists, and engineering crews. The plan was simple. Land near the ruins of the human settlement, scan for underground entrances, break into the tunnel system, find the humans and force them to surrender. What did you expect to find down there? Scared farmers hiding in dark holes. Maybe some mining equipment they could use as weapons. The general thought the humans might have explosives left over from their construction work, but nothing more dangerous than that. Lee Daeho made notes as Krixtal spoke. But that is not what your soldiers found. No, that is not what they found. Krixtal stood up and walked to the wall. His legs moved stiffly like walking hurt him. The dropships landed just after sunrise. I watched everything through the camera feeds from the soldiers' helmets. The landing zone was quiet. No movement, no sounds, just empty burned ground where the settlement used to be. What happened first? Nothing. For almost an hour, nothing happened. Our soldiers spread out and began scanning for tunnel entrances. They found several holes in the ground that led down into darkness. The holes looked like they had been cut with precise tools, not blasted open with explosives. Krixtal turned back to face Lee Daeho. That should have been our first warning. The holes were too perfect, too carefully made, but the general ordered the teams to go down anyway. How many soldiers went underground? 50 warriors in the first group. They carried portable lights and mapping equipment. Their job was to make a safe path for the others to follow. Krixtal sat back down heavily. I listened to their radio reports as they went deeper. The tunnels were wider than expected, tall enough for hover tanks to move through. The walls were smooth and lined with some kind of metal, not the rough stone you would expect from mining tunnels. What did the soldiers think about this? They were confused. These were not the kind of tunnels that farmers would dig. They looked more like military fortifications. But the general said to keep going. Lee Daeho looked up from his datapad. When did the attack begin? Krixtal's claws scraped against the table again. 23 minutes after the first team entered the tunnels. One moment they were walking through empty passages reporting back to us. The next moment, he stopped talking and stared at the wall. What happened? The lights went out. All at once. Every portable light, every helmet lamp, every piece of electrical equipment stopped working. Complete darkness underground. Equipment failure. That is what we thought at first. But then the soldiers started screaming. Krixtal's voice became very quiet. Not fear screams. Pain screams. Something was attacking them in the dark, but we could not see what. The radio signals were full of static and noise. I could hear plasma rifles firing, but the shots were not hitting anything. How long did this last? 3 minutes. Then the radio signal stopped completely. 50 Velthari warriors gone, just like that. Lee Daeho wrote more notes. What did your general do? He sent in the hover tanks. 20 armored vehicles with searchlights and heavy weapons. Their armor was too thick for small weapons to damage. Their lights were too powerful for anything to interfere with. Did the tanks find the missing soldiers? Yes, and that was worse than not finding them at all. Krixtal stood up again and walked in a small circle. The tank crews found the bodies in a large underground chamber. All 50 soldiers were dead, but they had not been killed by energy weapons. They had been killed by primitive projectile weapons. Bullets, pieces of metal fired from simple chemical guns. That seems impossible. You said your soldiers had energy shields and personal force fields. Yes, that is what made it so terrifying. Somehow the humans had found a way to get past our best protection using the most basic weapons in the galaxy. Krixtal stopped walking and looked directly at Lee Daeho, but that was not the worst part. The worst part was what the humans had done to the bodies. What do you mean? They had taken our soldiers' weapons and armor. But they had left something behind. A message written on the wall in Velthari script. Perfect grammar, perfect spelling. It said Phase 1 complete. Beginning Phase 2. Lee Daeho's fingers stopped moving across his datapad. The humans were following a plan. Yes, a plan they had made before we even arrived. And we were walking right into it. Krixtal sat back down. The general was very angry. He ordered all remaining ground forces to enter the tunnels at once. 200 warriors. 20 hover tanks. Full assault formation. He said the humans were just lucky in their first attack. He said Velthari technology would win in a fair fight. Was he right? He was wrong about everything. Krixtal's voice was full of bitterness. The humans did not want a fair fight. They wanted to destroy us using our own strength against us. Explain. When our main force entered the tunnels, they found the underground system was much bigger than we thought. Hundreds of passages going in every direction. Some led to large chambers. Others led to smaller rooms filled with strange equipment. And all of it was empty. Where were the humans? Everywhere and nowhere. We could hear them moving in the walls, talking to each other in their own language, sometimes laughing. But we could never see them. Krixtal's good hand formed a fist. Then the attacks began again. But this time the humans did not fight like soldiers. They fought like ghosts. What do you mean? They would appear long enough to fire a few shots, then disappear before our soldiers could shoot back. They used the tunnels like a maze, always staying ahead of our forces, and they had weapons we did not expect. Lee Daeho leaned forward. What kind of weapons? Explosives hidden in the tunnel walls. When our hover tanks drove over certain spots, the floor would explode underneath them. But the explosives were not random. They were placed exactly where they would do the most damage. The humans knew where your tanks would go? Yes, somehow they knew our standard formation patterns. They knew how Velthari forces move through confined spaces. They had studied us. Krixtal's voice became excited, like he was remembering something important. But the explosives were not the worst part. The worst part was what happened when our tanks were damaged. What happened? The humans would attack the crew members as they tried to escape. But they did not kill them quickly. They would wound them just enough to make them call for help on the radio. Then they would hide nearby and wait. Wait for what? For our rescue teams to arrive. When other soldiers came to help the wounded, the humans would attack them too. They turned our own military protocols against us. Our rule about never leaving wounded soldiers behind became a trap. Lee Daeho made more notes. How many soldiers did you lose in these attacks? 30 warriors in the first hour, 50 more in the second hour, and 6 hover tanks. But the numbers were not the real problem. The real problem was that our soldiers were becoming afraid. Velthari soldiers were afraid of humans? Yes, and that should not have been possible. Velthari warriors are trained from childhood to fight without fear. But these humans were doing things that made no sense. They were using tactics that were not in any military database. Krixtal looked down at his missing arm. That is when the humans began the psychological attacks. Psychological attacks? Yes. They started playing sounds through hidden speakers in the tunnels. Not human sounds. Velthari sounds. The death cries of our soldiers who had been killed. But they played them backwards and at different speeds until they sounded like monsters screaming. The humans recorded your soldiers dying? Yes. And they played the recordings in the darkness while our forces were trying to move through the tunnels. Imagine hearing your friends dying over and over while you walk through dark passages where enemies might be hiding anywhere. Lee Daeho was quiet for a moment. What effect did this have on your soldiers? Some of them began shooting at shadows. Others refused to move forward. A few even took off their helmets because they could not stand hearing the sounds anymore. Krixtal rubbed his temples. But the humans were not finished. They began leaving objects for our soldiers to find. Personal items taken from the dead warriors. Weapons that had been damaged in specific ways. Pictures of Velthari families that somehow the humans had obtained. Where did they get pictures of Velthari families? We never found out. But seeing those pictures made our soldiers realize the humans knew things about us that should have been impossible to know. Things that could only come from inside the Velthari Empire itself. You think the humans had spies in your empire? I think the humans had been watching us for a long time. Much longer than we had been watching them. Krixtal stood up again. Lee Daeho refilled his water glass and sat back down. The orbital bombardment failed. What did your general do next? Krixtal's eyes were focused on something far away. He ordered a full retreat from the tunnels. All remaining ground forces were to return to the dropships immediately. The plan was to go back to orbit and find a different way to attack. Did your soldiers make it back to the ships? Some of them did. Maybe 60 warriors out of the original 200. They came up from the tunnels running like they had seen demons. Their armor was damaged. Their weapons were almost empty. And their eyes, Krixtal shuddered. Their eyes looked like they had been fighting for weeks instead of hours. What did they report? They said the humans had let them escape. Just opened a path and allowed them to run back to the surface. No attacks, no pursuit. The humans just watched them go. Lee Daeho made a note. That seems unusual for a winning side. Yes, very unusual. When the survivors reached the dropships, they found something waiting for them. A small metal box sitting next to each ship. The boxes had not been there when they landed. What was in the boxes? Personal items from the dead soldiers, name tags, family pictures, pieces of armor. But they were arranged very carefully, like a memorial for the dead, and there was a note with each box. What did the note say? The same message in perfect Velthari script. We are sorry for your loss. War is always sad. Your soldiers fought bravely. Their families should be proud. Krixtal's voice became angry. The humans were giving us sympathy, like they had not been the ones who killed our people, like they were just innocent observers who felt bad about what happened. How did your soldiers react to this? They were confused and angry. Some of them wanted to destroy the boxes. Others wanted to take them back to the ships. A few soldiers just stood there staring, like they could not understand what they were seeing. What did they do? They took the boxes. What else could they do? Those were the only remains they had of their friends. And somehow the humans had known that Velthari soldiers would not leave their dead behind. Lee Daeho looked up from his data pad. The humans understood your military culture. Yes, they understood everything about us. How we think, how we fight, how we honor our dead. They used our own traditions against us. Krixtal stood up and walked to the wall again, but that was only the beginning. When our dropships tried to take off and return to orbit, the humans showed us what they had really been doing while we were fighting in the tunnels. What do you mean? The ships would not start. Every engine was dead. Every power system was offline. The humans had somehow disabled our entire landing fleet while we were underground. How is that possible? We never found out. Our engineers spent hours checking every system. They found no damage, no missing parts, no signs that anyone had touched the ships. But nothing worked. Krixtal turned back to Lee Daeho. Then the human voice came through our radios again. The same woman who had spoken to us before. She said, your ships are not broken. We have just borrowed some components temporarily. They will work again when we are finished talking. The humans wanted to negotiate? No, they wanted to teach us something. The woman said her name was Kim Soo-jin. She said she was the leader of the new Busan colony, and she said she wanted to explain why we had lost the battle. What did she tell you? She said the Velthari Empire had made 3 big mistakes. First, we thought human technology was primitive because it looked simple. Second, we thought humans were weak because they seemed peaceful. Third, we thought we could win because we had more ships and better weapons. Krixtal sat back down. Kim Soo-jin explained that all 3 ideas were wrong. She said humans had been studying galactic military tactics for 50 years. She said they had built their colony specifically to test their ideas against real alien forces. The colony was a trap? Yes, but not just for us. Kim Soo-jin said they had been expecting someone to attack them eventually. They had prepared for battles against 12 different alien species. We just happened to be the first ones to arrive. Lee Daeho stopped writing. They were prepared to fight 12 different species? Yes, and she proved it. Over the next hour, Kim Soo-jin described Velthari military tactics that were classified secrets. She knew our standard formation patterns. She knew our communication protocols. She knew the weak points in our armor and shields. How did she learn all of this? She said humans had been watching galactic military forces for decades. Not just watching, studying, learning, planning. She said every time an alien species fought a war, humans were taking notes. Krixtal's good hand began to shake. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was when she started talking about other alien empires. What about them? She knew things about the Zephyrian Republic that even we did not know. Secret fleet movements, hidden weapons programs, political agreements that were supposed to be classified. She talked about these things like she was reading from a news report. The humans were spying on multiple alien civilizations, more than spying. They were conducting a comprehensive intelligence operation across the entire galaxy, and they had been doing it for much longer than anyone realized. Krixtal stood up again and began pacing. Kim Soo-jin told us that humans had agents on dozens of worlds. Not soldiers, not obvious spies, just people who looked like refugees or traders or scientists, people who watched and listened and reported back to Earth. What was the purpose of this intelligence network? She said humans knew that contact with galactic civilization would eventually lead to conflict. Different species would see humanity as a threat or as a resource to be exploited. So they decided to be ready. Ready for war? Ready for everything? Kim Soo-jin said humans had spent 50 years preparing for first contact. They had studied every alien species they could find. They had learned our languages, our cultures, our military strategies, our weaknesses. Crystal stopped pacing and looked directly at Lee Dae-ho. She said the new Busan colony was just one of many test sites. Humans had built similar colonies throughout the galaxy, each one designed to study and fight against different alien forces. How many colonies? She did not say exactly, but she mentioned locations in 17 different star systems, all of them hidden from galactic surveys, all of them preparing for war. Lee Dae-ho was very quiet for a long moment. What happened to your stranded soldiers? Kim Soo-jin said they would be allowed to leave, but first they had to see something. She said she wanted to show us why humanity would win any war against the galactic powers. What did she show you? The tunnels. But not the parts where we had been fighting. The deeper levels, the parts we had never reached. Crystal sat down heavily. Kim Soo-jin activated lights throughout the underground system. Suddenly we could see everything through our soldiers' helmet cameras. The tunnel network was not just bigger than we thought. It was massive. How massive? Hundreds of kilometers of passages. Multiple levels going deep into the planet's core. Manufacturing facilities. Weapons storage areas. Living quarters for thousands of people. Command centers with communication equipment more advanced than anything on our ships. The humans had built an underground city. More than a city. A military base designed to survive orbital bombardment and support a long war. But that was not the most shocking thing we saw. What was? The weapons. Rows and rows of equipment that we did not recognize. Not energy weapons like ours. Something different. Something that looked both primitive and advanced at the same time. Crystal's voice became very quiet. Kim Soo-jin explained that humans had developed a completely different approach to military technology. Instead of making weapons more complex, they had made them more adaptable. What does that mean? It means human weapons could be modified to fight against any kind of enemy defense. Energy shields, armor plating, force fields. Human weapons could be adjusted to get past all of them. How? She did not explain exactly, but she demonstrated. She had her people target one of our battleships in orbit, not to destroy it, just to show us what they could do. Crystal looked down at his missing arm. A projectile launched from somewhere underground. It passed through our ship's energy shields like they were not there. It went through the armor plating without slowing down. It entered the ship's main power core and planted a small device. What kind of device? A transmitter. Suddenly our ship's computers were connected to the human communication network. Kim Soo-jin could access any system on the ship. Weapons, navigation, life support, everything. She took control of your battleship? No, she just proved that she could if she wanted to. Then she released control and let our crew regain command of their systems. Lee Dae-ho made more notes. What was her message? She said this demonstration was being transmitted to every major alien government in the galaxy. She said humanity was officially announcing its presence to galactic civilization, and she said any species that wanted to be friends with humans would be welcome, and those who wanted to be enemies. Crystal's yellow eyes looked very tired. She said those species would learn why humans had spent 50 years preparing for war. She said Earth had been building weapons and training soldiers and planning strategies for conflicts that had not happened yet. What happened to your battle group after this? Lee Dae-ho leaned forward in his chair. How many ships stayed to continue fighting? Crystal closed his eyes. 4 battleships. 15 attack cruisers. Maybe 3,000 soldiers total. Admiral Zechtel was in command. He was an old warrior who had fought in 20 battles across the galaxy. He said no primitive species could defeat the Velthari Empire. What was his plan? Simple and direct. He ordered all ships to form attack formation and destroy the human colony with overwhelming firepower. No more ground forces, no more trying to capture prisoners. Just complete annihilation from orbit. Did Kim Soo-jin try to stop him? She sent one more message to our fleet. She said the demonstration was over, and now the real test would begin. She said any ships that attacked the colony would not be allowed to leave the system. Crystal opened his eyes and looked at Lee Dae-ho. Admiral Zechtel laughed when he heard this. He said 10,000 human farmers could not threaten a Velthari battle fleet. He gave the order to begin bombardment. What happened when your ships fired? Nothing. For the first few seconds, nothing at all. Our plasma cannons charged up normally. The targeting systems locked onto the planet's surface. The weapons fired their energy beams exactly as they were supposed to. But the energy beams disappeared before they reached the planet. Not blocked. Not reflected, just gone, like they had been swallowed by empty space. Crystal stood up and walked to the corner of the room. Admiral Zektal ordered the weapons officers to check their systems. Everything was working perfectly. So he ordered a second bombardment. Same result. The energy beams vanished somewhere between the ships and the planet. What did the Admiral think was happening? He thought the humans had some kind of energy absorption technology. Something that could capture and store the power from our weapons. So he ordered a different kind of attack. What kind? Kinetic bombardment. Physical projectiles fired at high speed. Metal slugs that would impact the planet with the force of nuclear weapons. No energy for the humans to absorb. Crixtal turned back to face Lee Daeho. The metal projectiles were fired from all 4 battleships at once. We watched them on our tracking systems as they flew toward the planet. But just before impact, something impossible happened. What? The projectiles changed direction. All of them. They turned around in space and flew back toward our ships. But they were moving much faster than when we fired them. The humans sent your own weapons back at you? Yes, and somehow they had made the projectiles more powerful. When they hit our ships, they did much more damage than they should have been able to do. Crixtal's voice became very quiet. 3 attack cruisers were destroyed immediately. 2 battleships were heavily damaged. And then Kim Soo-jin spoke to us again. What did she say this time? She said we had failed the test. She said any species that would not listen to peaceful warnings would have to learn through experience. She said she was sorry for what was about to happen, but Admiral Zektal had made his choice. What happened next? The humans launched their counterattack. But not from the planet. From space, Lee Daeho stopped writing. From space? How is that possible? We never saw where they came from. One moment our sensors showed empty space around our fleet. The next moment there were human ships everywhere. Dozens of them. Ships that had been invisible to our detection systems. What kind of ships? Not like anything in our databases. They were smaller than our battleships but seemed to have more firepower. Their design was strange. Angular. Aggressive. Like they had been built specifically for destroying other spacecraft. Crixtal began pacing again. But the strangest thing was not their appearance. It was how they moved. Our ships are fast, but the human vessels moved like they could predict where we were going to be. They anticipated your maneuvers? Yes. Every time Admiral Zektal ordered evasive action, the human ships were already turning to follow our new course. Every time we tried to retreat, they were waiting in our path. It was like they could see the future. How many human ships were there? We counted 47. Against our remaining 2 battleships and 12 attack cruisers. The numbers should have favored us, but numbers did not matter. Crixtal sat back down heavily. The human ships attacked with weapons we had never seen before. Not energy beams. Not projectile cannons. Something that seemed to tear holes in reality itself. What do you mean? When the human weapons hit our ships, they did not just damage the armor or destroy equipment. They made parts of our ship simply cease to exist. Like those sections had been erased from the universe. That sounds impossible. Yes, impossible. But I watched it happen through the sensor feeds. Entire sections of our battleships would vanish, leaving perfectly smooth gaps where metal and electronics used to be. Crixtal's good hand formed a fist. Admiral Zektal ordered all remaining ships to retreat at maximum speed. He sent emergency signals to Velthari High Command requesting immediate reinforcements. But the human ships followed us. How far did they pursue you? To the edge of the star system. And then Kim Soo-jin spoke to us one final time. What was her final message? She said the battle was over, but the war was just beginning. She said humanity had been preparing for this moment for 50 years, and now it was time to show the galaxy what humans could really do. Crixtal looked down at his missing arm. She said our surviving ships would be allowed to return to Velthari space with a message for our government. But first, she wanted to show us something that would help us understand what humanity really was. What did she show you? The truth about human space capabilities. Kim Soo-jin activated some kind of scanning system that revealed everything in the surrounding area. Suddenly, our sensors could see things that had been hidden before. What kind of things? Human outposts. Hundreds of them, scattered throughout dozens of star systems. Not just colonies like New Busan, military bases, shipyards, research facilities, communication arrays. Crixtal's voice became very quiet. She showed us that humanity had been building a secret empire while the rest of the galaxy thought they were still confined to their home world. How long had they been expanding? Kim Soo-jin said the first human ships had left Earth 60 years ago. Not the slow colony ships that galactic governments knew about. Fast military vessels carrying soldiers and engineers and scientists. Where did they get this technology? She said humans had been studying crashed alien spacecraft for over a century. Every time a galactic ship had an accident near Earth, humans would salvage the wreckage and learn from it. Lee Dae-ho looked up sharply. Crashed ships from which species? All of them. Velthari, Zephyrian, Kron, Mathek, even some species I had never heard of. Kim Soo-jin said humans had been collecting alien technology for generations, studying it, improving it, and building their own versions. So human technology was based on alien designs? No, that was what made it so terrifying. Kim Soo-jin said humans had not just copied alien technology. They had found ways to make it better, faster, more efficient, more powerful. Krixtal stood up and walked to the wall. She said human engineers had solved problems that alien scientists thought were impossible. She said human weapons could defeat any known defense system because they combined technologies from dozens of different species. What was her point in showing you all of this? She wanted us to understand that the battle at New Busan was not an accident. It was a carefully planned test of human military capabilities against a real alien force, and we had provided exactly the kind of data they needed. Data for what? For the next phase of their plan. Kim Soo-jin said humanity was ready to make contact with galactic civilization, but not as a junior member asking for acceptance, as an equal power demanding respect. Krixtal turned back to Lee Dae-ho. She said any alien government that wanted to be friends with humanity would find them to be generous allies. But any species that tried to conquer or exploit human colonies would face the full military power of Earth. What happened to Admiral Zektol's fleet after this revelation? We were escorted to the edge of human space by their warships. Kim Soo-jin gave us navigation data for the journey back to Velthari territory. She also gave us a data packet to deliver to our high command. What was in the data packet? Complete records of the battle, video files showing human military capabilities, technical specifications for some of their weapons, and a diplomatic message. What did the diplomatic message say? That humanity was officially announcing its presence to all galactic governments. That Earth was claiming sovereignty over 47 star systems that they had already colonized, and that any alien force that entered human space without permission would be considered an invasion fleet. Krixtal sat back down. The message also included a list of minimum requirements for any species that wanted to establish diplomatic relations with humanity. What kind of requirements? Mutual respect for territorial boundaries, no slavery or exploitation of sentient beings, no unprovoked attacks against civilian populations, and no interference with human exploration and colonization efforts. Those seem like reasonable terms. Yes, very reasonable, which made them even more frightening. Lee Dae-ho looked confused. Why was that frightening? Because it meant the humans were not planning to conquer the galaxy. Lee Dae-ho's hand stopped moving across his datapad. What do you mean this conversation is part of their plan? Krixtal's yellow eyes were fixed on the human's face. During our journey back to Velthari space, I had time to think about everything that had happened. The battle, the demonstration, the revelations about human capabilities, and I began to notice things that did not make sense. What kind of things? Kim Soo-jin had been too prepared. She knew exactly what to say to make the biggest impact on Velthari psychology. She knew which information would frighten us most. She knew how to present human power in a way that would make us spread fear throughout our empire. Krixtal stood up and walked to the center of the room. But the most important thing I realized was that she wanted some of our ships to escape. She wanted survivors to return home and tell this story. Why would she want that? Because fear is a weapon, and the best way to use fear as a weapon is to let your enemies spread it for you. Lee Dae-ho put down his datapad completely. You think the humans wanted you to survive specifically to tell other aliens about their capabilities? I know they did, because of what happened when we reached the border of Velthari space. What happened? Our damaged ships were met by a rescue fleet from the Empire. 12 battleships and support vessels. They escorted us to the nearest military base for medical treatment and debriefing. Krixtal began pacing slowly. But when we arrived at the base, we found something waiting for us. A human delegation, already there, already talking to our military commanders. Humans were at a Velthari military base. Yes, 3 humans in diplomatic uniforms. They said they were representatives of the Earth government. They had arrived 2 days before us with an official message for the Velthari High Command. How did they get there so fast? And how did they know where to go? Those were the same questions I asked myself. Our journey back from New Busan had taken 3 weeks, but somehow the humans had reached our military base ahead of us, using ships that were faster than anything in the Velthari fleet. Krixtal stopped pacing and looked directly at Lee Dae-ho. But that was not the most disturbing part. The most disturbing part was that the human diplomats knew exactly what had happened in our battle. They had detailed reports about every ship movement, every weapon fired, every tactical decision made by our commanders. They had been monitoring the entire engagement. More than monitoring, they had been controlling it. The human diplomat, a woman named Dr. Lim Soo-young, explained that the Battle of New Busan had been carefully orchestrated to provide specific information to the Velthari Empire. What kind of information? Information designed to make our military leaders understand that fighting humanity would be a disaster, but also information designed to show them that cooperation could be profitable. Krixtal sat back down. Dr. Lim Soo-young presented our commanders with detailed intelligence about 3 other alien empires that were planning to attack Velthari territory. Intelligence that could only have come from deep inside those governments. The humans were offering to share intelligence with your empire, yes, as part of a mutual defense agreement. They said humanity had no interest in conquering Velthari space, but they were very interested in preventing unnecessary wars between galactic civilizations. What did your commanders say to this offer? They were suspicious at first, but Dr. Lim Soo-young proved the value of human intelligence by providing exact details about a secret Zephyrian attack fleet that was already moving toward our borders. Krixtal's voice became quiet. She told our admirals exactly where the Zephyrian ships would be in 3 days, what weapons they carried, and which of our systems they planned to attack first. She said this information was a gift to demonstrate human good faith. Was the intelligence accurate? Completely accurate. When our scout ships investigated the coordinates Dr. Lim Soo-young had provided, they found the Zephyrian fleet exactly where she said it would be. Our forces were able to prepare an ambush and destroy the entire attack force. So the humans saved your empire from a Zephyrian invasion? Yes, and that victory made our high command very interested in learning more about human capabilities. Dr. Lim Soo-young said her government was prepared to share much more intelligence in exchange for formal diplomatic relations. Lee Dae-ho picked up his datapad again. What kind of diplomatic relations? A non-aggression pact, mutual defense agreements, trade partnerships, and something called a Galactic Stability Initiative. What is that? Dr. Lim Soo-young said humanity wanted to work with peaceful alien governments to reduce conflicts throughout the galaxy. She said too many resources were being wasted on wars between species that should be cooperating. Krixtal's claws scraped against the table, but she also made it clear that any species that refused to participate in this initiative would be considered a threat to galactic peace. What happened to species that were considered threats? She did not say directly, but she showed our commanders what had happened to the Kron hegemony. What about the Kron? They had attacked a human research station 6 months before our battle at New Scitu, Busan. The station was completely destroyed, and all 300 humans were killed. Dr. Lim Soo-young said this. Attack could not be ignored. Krixtal's voice became very quiet. She showed us surveillance recordings of what humanity did in response. The entire Kron home system was blockaded by human ships. All Kron vessels were disabled and boarded. Kron military leaders were arrested and put on trial for war crimes. The humans invaded the Kron home system? Not invaded, occupied. Dr. Lim Soo-young said the Kron government had been replaced by a human administration that would remain in place until the Kron species learned to behave like civilized beings. How long would that take? She said it might take generations, maybe centuries. She said humanity was very patient when it came to teaching proper behavior to aggressive species. Lee Dae-ho made more notes. What was your high command's reaction to this information? They signed the diplomatic agreements immediately. Full alliance with Earth, mutual defense pacts, trade agreements, everything Dr. Lim Soo-young had requested. And in return, humanity shared their intelligence networks with us. Suddenly we had access to information about every major military movement in our part of the galaxy. We could predict attacks before they happened. We could identify threats before they became dangerous. Krixtal looked down at his missing arm. But the price of this information was accepting human oversight of our military activities. We could no longer attack other species without human approval. We could no longer expand our territory without human permission. The humans were controlling Velthari foreign policy, not controlling, guiding. Dr. Lim Soo-young said humanity was helping us make better decisions. Decisions that would lead to peace instead of war. How did the Velthari people react to this arrangement? Most of them did not know about it. The alliance with humanity was classified at the highest levels. But those who did know were grateful. Our empire became safer and more prosperous than it had ever been. Krixtal stood up again. That is when I began to understand what humanity was really doing. They were not conquering the galaxy. They were managing it. Managing it how? By making themselves indispensable to every major alien government. Species that cooperated with humanity received intelligence, protection, and economic benefits. Species that opposed humanity were isolated, weakened, and eventually absorbed into the human sphere of influence. And this process was happening throughout the galaxy? Yes. Over the following months, I learned that humanity had made similar arrangements with dozens of other species. Each government thought they were getting a special deal with Earth. None of them realized they were all being guided toward the same goal. Lee Dae-ho leaned back in his chair. What goal? A galaxy where humans were the ultimate arbiters of peace and war. Where no major decision could be made without human approval. Where human values and human laws gradually became the standard for all civilized species. Krixtal walked back to his chair but did not sit down. Dr. Lim Soo-young called it peaceful integration. She said humanity was creating a new kind of galactic civilization based on cooperation instead of conquest. But it was still conquest, wasn't it? Just a different kind. Yes. Conquest through necessity instead of force. Conquest through making themselves too valuable to oppose. How does this relate to our conversation today? Krixtal looked directly at Lee Dae-ho. Because you are not really a coalition intelligence officer, are you? Lee Dae-ho's expression did not change. What makes you think that? Your questions are too specific. Too focused on gathering information that would be useful for human strategic planning. And your responses to my answers show knowledge that only a human intelligence operative would have. You could be wrong. I could be, but I am not. Krixtal sat down and leaned forward. The Galactic Coalition itself is a human creation, is it not? A way to formalize human influence over multiple alien governments. Lee Dae-ho was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached up and touched his collar. A small device attached to his uniform flickered and deactivated. You are very perceptive, Krixtal. So I am right. You are human. Yes, my name is Lee Dae-ho of the Earth Strategic Intelligence Division.